Hello and welcome to the Solve Network. My name is Shane Borza and I'll be your host. Along with my co-founder Benjamin Goss, we'd like to welcome you. Our mission is to provide solutions and create a network of experts for you to learn from. Now this show is a little different than most podcasts as it is actually a live call held twice a month. If you can, please join us on the first and third Thursday of each month so you can get your questions answered live and direct from the experts themselves. If you're an expert, please contact me at shaneborza.com so you can be a part of the network. And now, here's our show. Today on the Solve Network, we have Michael Koth as our guest expert from My Physicology. My Physicology is a new way of optimizing the human body by connecting the mind, body, and soul. And Michael has many decades of experience in health, wellness, fitness, as well as clinical psychology and spiritual counseling. I know Michael personally, and you will get a lot out of this episode. Please enjoy. Hi, I'm Shane Borza, a climber, creator, and coach, and I want you to build the skill of health and fitness. My new course is a priceless gift to you, and it's available exclusively on PonoQuest.com. That's P-O-N-O Quest.com. Build the Skill is a minimalistic, functional, real-world fitness program which can help you to move better and get stronger faster. I can't wait for you to check it out, and when you do, please let me know how it helps you. That's Build the Skill at PonoQuest.com. I'd like to thank everyone who's on the call live and for everyone who is listening afterwards. As you just heard, a couple of people I know are not able to make it, but they are interested in listening to Michael talk a little later. So I will send that call out to all of you. So thank you, whether you're on the call live or not. And Michael, really excited to have you here. I'm glad you could join us. And I've known Michael for several years. He is a brilliant guy, fascinating. I've had many instances where I walk into the room and he's like, hey, what's going on? And next thing you know, we've had a 2-hour discussion that's gone from A to Z. And it always brings up new perspectives and things that I didn't know beforehand. And I've been aware of My Physicology program for a little bit. I've read through his ebook, which I would recommend everyone go to his website. I believe it's free. You can kind of put yourself through some of the questions that he asked you. And I got a lot of interesting thoughts out of it. And it's stuff that I wouldn't have known unless I had done the book. So I would encourage you all to do that. So I want to keep that intro kind of short and sweet and hand it over to Michael. And I'm really excited to hear what he's going to talk to us about.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shane. Really appreciate your invitation to be here. And I thought about it today with regards to what might be the best way to present My Physicology to the group and people that are listening. I want to first start by saying it's typically interactive, as my background is in the body and fitness and health and wellness in those ways. And so it came up organically through working with other people in a fitness way. Since we're talking, I think it's best what I do is just give you a background of myself, my personal experience, what were really the underpinnings which came through me, which became My Physicology, and we'll go from there, especially after going through the blog that was written about this and the example about the guy who basically froze himself to death out of his own fear. That's a great example. I'm going to just remove that and plug in myself and put that there, and we'll start with that. So there's a couple of things that are personal ideations that really impact the philosophy of My Physicology. One of them is that we're a spiritual being having a human experience, and a collective species first and an individual second. And the other thing is that we have consciousness a priori to the human experience. And what that really means with regards to what we're talking about in the way I'm using that is that we're creators. We come into life as creators, including the collaborations that we do with our parents we stepped into the family. I look at things as an active participant in every eye blink of what we create in our human life. Since I write that the body is the non-conscious, that there really is no thinking that's non-conscious or beyond us, that's the body to me. And so that's the correlation that I would like everybody to at least go with me on, and we can talk about that a little bit later. So my personal experience, I would tell people I was born and it was instantly traumatic from there. I was ill as a child, put in an incubator, for in and out for most of my first year of life, prior to the time period where we realized that we need human touch to attach. So, my attachments were to an incubator. I was hit by a car, thrown out of a car, had my first sexual experience with grandma, was given my first drink, and then it was off to kindergarten. And so, I want to go over that because those are the underpinnings and the foundation for my life, right? So my father had cancer at the time. I didn't know what was happening. Memory doesn't come online until we're about 2.5 years old. And so everything was just downloaded into my body. Right. So my first experience with grandma, which is something that I want to talk about later on, without getting into the details, grandma told me she loved me. The experience that I actually had, I didn't know the difference. And so how I recorded that experience became love for me. Later on in my life, I realized that it was extreme physical excitement and shame and guilt. But my neurology and my process split off so that I could sustain the experience. Why that is important is because I didn't feel the experience, I just recorded it. When I had my first drink, my first day of kindergarten, my grandfather took me down to the fruit cellar in his farmhouse in the basement and pulled out a bottle of schnapps and told me I was the man of the family. And we had a little bit of schnapps and a beer before my breakfast. And he was the bus driver. And so that was important to me because these were loving experiences. Excuse me, or so I thought. What ended up happening is I took those experiences and really used it to, they impacted my life profoundly. There were so many traumas in my first 5 years of life that I had no idea that that's what they were. Right. And so with regards to the emotional experience of it, I had no ability to do that. And so what it was just behavior for me. And I ended up existing in the one place left in the room that was reasonably comfortable for me, and that was happy. Right. So you would think that sexual molestation, alcohol at 5 years old, hit by a car, and other traumatic affect, happy is not really the correct emotional response to have. And later in life, what ultimately happened is that turned into a defense. I was always happy no matter what, under all circumstances, because I had no ability to go into any other emotion besides that. If we scroll ahead, now I do want to interject all of this. How I see it is recorded and held in the body, which is our hard drive. And we develop a process or a cognitive behavioral way of being around these, right? So I attached my emotional experience with my grandmother as loving because grandmas must love their grandkids, and that must be what I'm experiencing. So as I move forward in life later on, what started occurring was trauma recreation for me. My solution to everything was to behave sexually and to drink along with that. So if you put those two together moving forward into the late 60s and the early 70s, number one, I blended in with community, but number two, it was easy to get away with for a while. Of course, in my late teens and early 20s, I started bartending. And that was another place for me to fit in. We just did a documentary on the place that I bartended in Los Angeles. 40 years later with regards to what that was like in Hollywood. And it's a piece, it's called Studio One Forever. If anybody wants to see it, it'll be coming out in the movies at some point. So what does this have to do with physicology, and how did I get to this point? Let's get into some of the things that will bring it a little bit more intensely. I ended up in my first rehab at 21 years old. I was diagnosed bipolar 1 with psychotic features. I had no clue really what was going on. I didn't know why my life was falling apart around me. Under those circumstances, I could read in a book what bipolar was, but I had no ability to associate what that meant for me. It didn't make any sense. And so while I was in rehab, I took 2 magic markers and a calendar, blue for a good day, red for a bad day, and I started marking calendar days. Well, within about 6 months, I started having 25 good days in a row and 5 not so good days. And I just was browsing, reading through some things. And I noticed one day I kind of fell into reading about the Big Bang Theory, expansion and consolidation, and photogenesis, how our cells recreate. And it was the first link that I had to bringing my experience to any sort of science connectivity and internal and external synchronicity, if you will. So I kept doing this for a while, and another thing started to occur to me, that the 25 to 5 was like the feminine system, for females without a 5-day stretch. And, I really had started to just slowly but surely discover more questions than any answers at the time. And this led me to wanting to learn more about myself, right? And so I went into health and wellness. I started fitness training in 1975 at a place called Gold's Gym in Venice with some of the old dogs. The guy that trained me how to train, his name's Jim Morris. And he was one of the people that was in pumping iron. And I was his first floor monitor at Jim Morris Gym in Hollywood. And so, it was prior to fitness training in and of itself, but I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I enjoyed working with other people, in addition to starting to learn about myself and develop some strength around some of the circumstances that I was holding within me. That scroll ahead, I've done that for about 45 years, and that really became the foundation and the motivation for me to move further along. I had a really challenging dance with trying to get sober. It was very, very difficult for me. I didn't understand why I kept going back to what I was going back to. I didn't even really fully admit to the vulnerability of being molested when I was young, because I didn't really understand that that's what it was. So for anybody that's challenged in those ways of not having a clarity or thinking of themselves in a way that's less than strong, in the blog we talked about it as the word weak. I like to look at things as holistic and in a survival way. So we survive in adapting to what our experiences are, and the neurological programming of that in our body and in our brain is such that becomes our norm, and that becomes our truth until we reach conflict in our environment. Because with basic cognition, the cognitive actor does not grow until there's conflict in the environment. Well, my conflict was coming inside first. I could always feel it. And then my behavior seemed to skew from what my heart was telling me. I knew I was a good person. I knew I was a loving person. But what came out didn't seem to be loving. First to myself, and what I believe to be true is we can't give somebody something that we don't have. So if I don't have self-love, then what I'm giving you must be something different than that, right? And so in hindsight, I started putting some of this together with regards to what might be going on for me. And this was a long and arduous journey with some of this. I want to scroll ahead a little bit because I don't want to get too caught in just my things, but these were some of the factors and the motivations from within that really gave me the drive to go back to school. First and foremost, all the letters behind my name, my bachelor, my master's, and my PhD, really it took all of that just to get a beginning to understand myself, right? And so, I am a person that I really needed to know, and I could feel that I hadn't reached the origin of myself. I really hadn't gotten back to the origin of what it was. As it turned out, the origin was an inability to be vulnerable. I've spent many years, 4 decades to be precise, in 12-step programs, which really we could look at it as cognitive behavioral and structural change. And that's where I first started learning about what vulnerability is, how allowing myself to listen to another person can impact me in a way that I can't take myself. In the rooms, they talk about, we can't keep it if we don't give it away, and we can't use the same head that got us drunk to get ourselves sober. That line right there is important, I believe, for those of us that have gone into the coaching field, because it's very, very important to create a distinction in my mind between where we end and our client or the person we're working with begins. What I've learned over this time with some of the traumas that I've had and the affect that's lasted for a long, long time is that it's about everything's co-created. And we are like an alchemical process between the two of us, where you pour your ingredients into the center, I pour mine, and those chemicals of whatever combust into the creation of something new. And in this way, you've got space between, so you can take what you need and leave the rest, and I have space between, and I can take what I need and leave the rest. And it's always a teacher-student, student-teacher type of dynamics and relationship. The only way that I could coach you would be for you to teach me about you and your goals and areas that you see, because you're the expert within yourself. You live in there. I don't. That's how I see a collective species first, that we're always a we first, and that everything is always collaborative. So what I had to do and what I had to take a look at is, if that's true, in the 4 decades that it took me to get to the place where I actually believe that, then I need to go back into all of my past and review it with that same philosophy, rather than allowing myself to be a victim or an aggressor of any of my experiences. And what that required me to do was really do a clearing for myself. And how do you do that? Well, you correct yourself when you're wrong. You make apologies to other people that you've hurt whenever possible. You abstain from doing that when it might be continually negative to another person. Self-recognition with regards to what you're talking about, whatever subject that may be, and move forward and hopefully have a little bit of grace. I liken our process to a cell phone. Our connection to the internet, or collective consciousness, if you will. Our option is we have the ability to connect with 4 bars of Wi-Fi or 1 bar of Wi-Fi, or none for that matter. We can work offline, but then we can only work with the programming that's already downloaded on our cell phone. We can't upgrade and we can't interact. Right. So I believe the body works the same way neurologically, and our neurological system is the same as well. Things that would support what I'm talking about with regards to the feminine process is typically, we have books out, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and, the right brain is the feminine and conceptualization, and left brain is literal, linear space and time dictation exists there, things like structural, things like that. When I found my 25 to 5, I also realized it's the element of creation, photosynthesis, Big Bang. And so that feminine process, which exists within all of us, is also right brain. So when I started discovering and working in cognitive neuroscience and the physiology and clinical psychology. What I did with physicology is put it into a place to where it's always a collaboration between right brain and left brain, but right brain comes online first. It's also where the blueprint to the body is. So the feminine / conceptualization is always first. It's our walking scanner right here. Our recording device is left brain, hierarchy, right, wrong, good, bad. It's really a part of our reptilian animal brain, where the other part of our brain I believe to be angelic, where the feminine comes from, our conceptualization, quantum spiral, chaos theory. These are the concepts that guide our body initially. So what is the part that the cohesive component to that? Excuse me, what I believe is it's our selected choice of behavior. What do we choose to do about things? How do we choose to be within that? What's our intention, and are we aligned authentically with what choice of behavior we are making at the time? You see, I believed that I was a loving person, but what came out was so very different than my intention. I didn't know what was creating that. And in my discovery and my exploration, these are the components that led to what I now call my physicology. I do believe that it's important. In psychology, we have something called scope of practice. And, in coaching, we don't have the legal licensure or the specific structure to the degree that medical and or psychological communities currently have. And so what I believe to be true with this is it's our responsibility as coaches to really define our line of demarcation for ourselves. What I'm doing right now, which is sharing about myself, some of the experiences that I have, and what, then you get the opportunity to take what you need and leave the rest, or ask questions about it, or, we can do a collaboration, maybe share your own experiences and see what we can do moving forward. I would like to, at this point, because I do work more that way, is open it up if anybody has questions or if they'd like to make comments and put things in the middle so that we can combust something out of that.
So I'm going to jump in. So thank you, Michael, for that overview. And I think it's, on one hand, it's a little dense because there's so much background and training and different aspects, like you said, the physical training and the psychology and the therapy and the everything. But on the other hand, for me, having been familiar with it, it all like meshes together beautifully. But the thing I would like to ask you to delve into a little more, because I had mentioned you have your workbook that people can download. So where did that come from, and what purpose does that serve? Like, how does that workbook help someone, and how does that help you work with them?
Okay. Well, in this conversation, I just kind of shared a bunch of personal experiences, not ones that we would share in daily conversation typically, or some of them maybe not. We would consider them in society more private, right? I came from a place early on where, without getting into details, I did not know that I was a victim of sexual molestation. For many, many, many years, I was 21 years old in a group therapy, listening to somebody else read a letter to her dead grandfather before I even recognized, oh my God, this was something that I could associate and relate to. So the workbook is set up, I've sectioned it as body, mind, soul. So, for example, rather than saying, do you have a soul? I ask the question, are you a soul? Because I want people to think about things. I want people to really cultivate their inner experience, which gives us the opportunity to set up our own self-structure and sense of self. The reason I did this is because I had none. Right? In my early relationships, I would take you hostage, be hyper attentive to what you were doing and how you were doing it. because I thought I was you. I didn't know that I was separate from you, right? And it's like we think about that, and it's like, we can talk about it as enmeshment, or codependent is a term that gets tossed around quite a bit, and we have some understanding of that. No, I had no understanding that I wasn't you. And that's why my aggression to investment in what you were doing and how you were doing it was so strong, right? So in the workbook, I want to give people a private opportunity to sit there and cultivate themselves and ask themselves some questions rather than, opening themselves to other people if they're not ready to do so, and or give them an opportunity to think a little bit prior to doing that, right? And see if I can stimulate some ideas within them based on that come from my experience. And, I jokingly tell people that, I signed up for the Human School for Slow Learners because I needed really big lessons to come to a beginning of understanding of some of these dense concepts that you brought voice to. So that would be first and foremost what I'd like to have people derive from it.
Thanks for explaining that, because I think some of the people wouldn't have gone to the website or seen the workbook yet. So I wanted to make sure there was some context of kind of what it is and what purpose it serves. I'm getting a notice saying I have unstable internet, so I apologize if I'm going in and out. But a little bit. Lindsay's the only one I can see on camera other than Michael. Did you have any questions you want to jump in? Because I have some more questions, but I don't want to dominate.
Not at the moment. I'm honestly just kind of taking it in.
Okay. So one of the things that I've learned in my coaching practice, which Lindsay will know, she's at the same school, is it's a lot of presence and awareness. And I have definitely learned that, and this is something that Michael and I have talked about previously. We have a little bit of a difference of opinion, but we were taught to really get out of your head and get into your body. And the more I do the work of, getting out of the conscious, I'm in my head, my mind is swirling like crazy. It's all thinking, and kind of dropping down into kind of the gut and into the intuition and into like all the things that and that's where I will realize like, oh, there's some stuff. Oh, it's been here a long time. Oh, what is it? Oh, I have to identify it. Like, how do I give it a name? Like, how do I kind of talk to it and let it have a voice? And that has led to kind of some profound breakthroughs for me. And a lot of it is some of that old stuff. So when you talk about the body kind of encoding, the message from the mind, I just want to see if kind of the language that I was taught from my coach training, do you feel that that's like a parallel, or are they in opposition? What do you have to say about that?
Well, what you just said, I think it was beautifully put. The physicology does have it. I shared more personal tonight, but there is a technical component to it right here in the medial frontal lobe. It's a walking scanner. So we have ports in our shoulders, our elbows, our wrists, our knees, our ankles, our hips. And so we miss nothing is the point of that. So you think of it this way. If as human beings, we can create infrared scanners and other types of scanners, we can't create something that we don't already have. Right. So the way I see the external world is an extension of what already exists within humanity. So that being said, this is a scanner. We miss nothing. We bounce out neurons and they come back in right here as a chemical key. It's called ligand. So a ligand chemical key, they come back in each shape and size based on what we're scanning, including people and including what people carry with them neurologically. It happens faster than light speed, and so it travels through something called the anterior cingulate. It drops down into the body, combusts with the opiate receptor of the cell, and that combustion travels back up. We contextualize it in the limbic system, and it comes out, and that is the neurological process of emotion. So it comes out as our view, and that keeps moving, and that is constant faster than light speed, so that we have things like touch, feel, smell, hearing. That's the structural component. So when you go to my physiology page, you'll see an Infinity 8 in the image of it. That's what the Infinity 8 is, right? So that's a basic premise. If people know no more about neurology than that, recognize that there is a scientific structural process behind it. And over top of that is where we download our experience. So the hard drive, what I believe to be true, we come in with all human before us and our own experience that we've come in to download into our body, and then we create it, right? So all of the traumatic affects that I shared about my early life were downloaded into my body, and then my life has been about bringing them conscious and putting meaning to them, right? And that particular process is what I believe we all do. And, what does that mean? Well, collaborations, we can look in society. None of us can get past our own perspective. But none of us can. Like I can talk to you about yours. Like you said, that we have a difference in some ways. I'd be curious as to what that is, because I love that stuff. That shows me that you are thinking and that you have some structure with yourself that I find to be vital. Right? Because these are the things that are collaborative. That's what I mean by the space between. Where I don't go is to compete with you with that. I find that, we'll call it the feminine or receptivity of hearing you, is vitally important if in fact I've done my homework and I know where my self-structure is. Right. So I guess we could call that self-security or, contribution, whatever you want a word you'd like to put on it. That's how I see the neurology of the space between. Does that make sense? So I think you actually said it better than I did.
So I'm really glad that you just used the word neurology, because it reminded me of the question I started with, which is, so I have a friend who's a coach. He is a keto specialist and a primal movement guy. So he's, barefoot, he's outside, he's doing a lot of natural kind of fitness type things. And he has ADD, and he was told that he's probably had it his whole life. And actually his brother and sister probably have it, and his dad probably had it. And he just never knew. He just thought he was, bad at things. And so he's created some stuff that is only now kind of being worked through because he's been able to identify it. So your story really resonates with me when you talk about like, oh, I didn't know what this was. So until he was kind of told like, oh, now that you've been tested, now that you've been diagnosed, now that we kind of recognize what you're going through, you're able to say, oh, all the things that you mentioned, yes, I have all of those things, but I didn't know that having all those things meant anything. So he was on some medication, and through kerfuffles of bureaucracy and various BS, he no longer has access. So he has decided that he's going into a carnivore diet reset right now. And he's been on it for like 2 months, and he and his wife are both doing it. She has chronic nosebleeds. She has horrible allergies. She is on all kinds of like over-the-counter stuff for years and years and years. She gets like bronchitis every year. All of her allergies have gone away. All of his brain fog and inability to remember people's names and all his kind of ADD effects have all gone away. And so one of the things that he's interested in is knowing, can I like cure myself just by what I put into the system? Because what I was doing before was just, normal kind of the SAD diet, the standard American diet for his whole life. And it's only been the last few years that he's really cleaned up and eaten, super strict keto and been mindful of how he feels. And again, that is a lot of awareness and being present. And what did I eat? How does it make me feel? Do I want to feel like that? Do I want to keep eating that? Do I want to eat something else? So my question is, with you working in the body and being a trainer and all of that, but knowing the neurology, do you feel, or do you think, or do you know that that kind of input can have such a big response? Like, is that a way for him to say, oh, I don't need this because my diet will fix me, but really that's a crutch? Or is like that a reality and he can kind of solve some of these issues just by doing some of those biological things like fresh air, sunshine, getting out of junk light, fixing his diet, being super strict and clean, and that kind of thing?
Okay. So first off, I'm going to say absolutely. I also want to say there are many paths to the top of the mountain, right? So the one that he's referencing for himself comes from within himself. And so where physicology would collaborate with this would be a couple things. And you mentioned his wife had nosebleeds. So let me use that as an example initially. So with our walking scanner right here, we define the intention of another person neurologically through our septum, right? So what physicology would say is, okay, why is this person bleeding with their scanner, right? What within them? It's one of two things. It's either they don't trust the information that's coming towards them, or they're blocking the information and it's beyond what their self-structure is capable of sustaining by themselves, and therefore their body is giving a dialogue that is bringing their attention to what might be going on with that, right? So that's how physicology would say it. Now, can these things be corrected? If they're doing the nutritional plan together, I would say there's a collaboration right there. So, and there's a trusting collaboration. There's also a seeking involved to that. There's a contrary to what has been in that. So they're trying something different. And in that, those components would be what I would draw attention to first and foremost. And that the result that we're attaching to whatever the keto structure that they're using, that's an extension of the result of their inner work that they're doing, right? So that's how I would view some of that. Is it the food fixing us? I think in those ways, I see the intestines as our main brain, right? The right brain of this brain, and then the intestines come online first. They're constantly in collaboration through the esophagus. And so that dialogue that is constant, the clearer we can get with that dialogue, the two things will happen. Number one, the flow is going to go faster, right? And the other part of it is what's not working is going to become clearer, right? So in doing that, then when you're gaining clarity in things that are no longer working for you, you can take actions to create change with that. And so that's what I see with regards to him. So for example, ADHD, I use the word faster. For me, changing the focus from this brain to his intestinal brain, it would allow for him to pick up the pace in the primary brain and match the pace of his thinking. So somebody that is ADHD, in the way I see things, is going at such a fast pace, running through their filing cabinet, that others can't keep up with them. And in that way, are unable to associate and connect synchronistically. So it always gets bounced back into themselves. And it creates a frustration, which then creates all of the other affects, whatever those are, for him.
So the other person who wanted me to, that emailed me earlier, that wanted me to send the recording in, this is a complete shift. So which you might enjoy the complete 180 of this. So,
Sure.
Another coach that I know, she has a brand. It's more of like a retreat focus than like a coaching focus. But they do a lot of like coaching practices on the retreats. It's called Unhustle. And one of the things that she talks about is how all of the, society as a whole, but also everyone who is, entrepreneurial, is just hustling more and more and more. And we're constantly ratcheting up the input, the inner talk, and the speed of which we're trying to do all these things. And her message is to have people like relax, get into natural situations, unplug and give themselves that kind of physical break and breath so that they can like slow down and kind of reset themselves mentally. So I'm curious to see your thoughts on that kind of reset and how either maybe taking the body and going out and being like out near the water or out in nature can reset the brain, or if the brain taking a break from all of this information can reset the body. Is it one? Is it the other? Can it be both? I'm just curious what your thoughts are on
Okay.
kind of that.
Well, for me, everything's always both. It's always both. It's any time that we're recognizing it as one or the other, that's a great portal. But when you've got a seesaw and it's either this way or this way, you're going to recognize those imbalances, even if you don't know that you're on the downside or you're on the upside at the time, right? And so in those moments, the body and body, mind, soul always works in balance. Always. It's a given. We come in that way. That's our set point. I'm reminded with your question of what a 12-step would say. There's one sentence. It's the shortest sentence in the AA Big Book, and the most difficult one, at least for this person, to do. And that's, when in doubt, we pause. Right. So for me, pausing was an hour and a half advanced cycle class, because that connected me with my resonation, and I feel more at home in the very fast, quick pace. That resonates here. The challenging work for me is to pause. I've done it over times in my life, mostly because I've forced myself to, by bouncing off of some wall in the outside world and having to bounce back. And those things actually became health issues, right, for me ultimately. But along with that learning, I've been able to take it from the outside structuring me to bringing it inside my own body and structuring it. So for those that are able to take moments and pause and reset themselves, it's like letting the dust settle water and wiggle it around a little bit. It's going to get very ripply for a while, and then you can wait until it pauses. I believe that both parts of that are vitally important, right? To go philosophical for a minute, we're on a planet catapulting across this particular galaxy, going through many other galaxies, and that needs to be honored as well. So pace of processing and things like that, I believe that our collective goes along with that to sustain us. And so these things are evolutionary process that I believe in. I don't believe that humans really make mistakes. We may perceive it in a thermodynamic way, which would be right, wrong, good, bad, left, right. But those sort of ideations come from animal brain. And I believe our original conception is angelic, the conceptual part of ourselves, right? So anytime we can reconnect in any way that we can get to do that, great, absolutely great. Does that answer your question?
Yes, no, it really does. And it's great that you talk about it in that way, because my coaching practice is based on the equilateral triangle of, equalizing the mind, the body, and the spirit. And so I will have sometimes people come in and they want to develop their fitness. And then I'll start asking them about, how's their sleep and how's their stress level and how's their relationship, because that's going to take a lot of energy away from their ability to get fitter. And at first they'll kind of be like, no, I don't want that side. I want this side. But to me, they're all connected. So just like you said, oh, it's both. Yeah. So I was like, yes, exactly. It's both. Yeah. So I think that at least makes sense to me. And so I think that speaks to us as a system. So like you were saying, it's a we, not a me. So I feel like that's also the same in ourselves, because we have this system where all of these different parts, kind of like we play all these different roles. But the thing I wanted to ask about is, so for myself, I always use the word spirit, and part of that is for the spiritual part of us, but also I like the connotation of someone having a lot of spirit, like you would say about a horse, like, oh, it's a spirited animal, they have a lot of themselves, so I really like that concept or that application of the word. And when you say soul, and you speak of this angelic nature, so I'm curious if you can go into more of that and how the specificity of that fits into the my physicology, especially if there's any connection between that and the Infinity Eight.
Sure. Okay. So again, it's always both. Right. So I had a class in my doctoral program on exactly the question that you're asking. What's the difference between soul and spirit? Are you familiar with the story of Narcissus, who looked in his reflection and couldn't get out of his reflection by the island of Lesbos and ended up in a bunch of pieces on the island ultimately? Okay, so that was part of the topic of conversation about this. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, soul it encompasses. It does not suggest movement. It just is, right? I see the feminine that way. It's just pure love. It's there, period. Spirit suggests movement, right? And so I see spirit more as the dropping into the masculine components of soul, and then the soul itself as just essence itself. So I have a book that was written in the late 1800s. It's called On Sex and Character by a guy named Otto Weininger. And it was a philosophical book, but it was written with some underpinnings of origins of how the body functions. One of the examples would be that in gestation, the hormonal flushes that we have push one gender forward more than the other one, but we're all born with both. Right. And that's not a constant, that process continually changes. Now that was written in the late 1800s, and we're just now currently getting more elevated awareness of transgender or the differing terms or people moving through differing genders and what does that mean for us. And so it's taken over 100 years for just that process to go. But also in this book, they wrote about genius. So they would talk about women automatically have genius and men have to strive to achieve it. So to me, that reminded me of the conversation of soul versus spirit. We're all both, always. We have abilities to dictate the essence of love and the movement of love at the same time, right? Just like the body, we have an accelerator and a brake. Our accelerator, I would say, is spirit, and the brake is fear. They're both vital. We need them both. When we dictate pace of processing based on these emotions. And they're also components of creation, first internal and then external, right? So what does fear do? Let's talk about that because it's such a great internal creator. What happens is it's built into our hardwiring system, our fight, flight, freeze process, right? It's the flight part. So what happens is this brain, we scan, if we see something that might be what would create a fear process for us, the body will release what's called nitric oxide, which is a naturally made opiate. It causes the body to recoil. They did some studies on this where they would hold infants' hands above a flame and it would automatically pull back. The infant didn't know from a flame, but these are the things that are hardwired. It's hardwired in us for survival purposes, right? Well, just as they used the example in the blog about the guy who feared himself to death through freezing, basically, the animalistic nature would say that. So yes, in the underpinnings of the reptilian component of that, absolutely. The angelic would say that the person made a selected choice to leave the planet in that moment by forging ahead to such a degree of fear that they didn't save themselves, thus availing themselves, right? So we have Eastern philosophy, we've had it in battles where the kamikaze fighters, or in current days, we've seen it in violent ways. But we use it every day in our day-to-day life, forms of that, right? So I'm hoping that as we talk about things internally, we can look for the correlation so that it doesn't have to be so amplified in the external for us to come to some understanding of why we're doing this. Does that make sense? So, for example, Eastern philosophy, it's indexical. People define themselves, their self-structure, by how they contribute to the group. That essence is who they are. Here, it's me first, then you, right? And as it's always both, what I believe to be true is our alignment goes to the place where we have self-recognition, whose ultimate purpose is to contribute to the group. And in that way, we find balance within ourselves. Right? Because we've heard cliches, oh, we're only as strong as the weakest link. Well, if we're a collective consciousness, which I believe we are at all times, then trying to get one up on somebody else is actually doing a disservice to all of us, including ourselves. Right? That those of us that are coaches and in that position where we really want to help other people need to be able to and avail ourselves to come from under the other person for support rather than leading this way or be the change you want to see. Right? I believe Gandhi got it right. Exemplify through our own behavior. And I mean all of it. Willingness to be open and honest, share our deepest, darkest secrets, put them out so that people can take what they need and leave the rest. You know, it's taken me a long time to be able to sit on a phone call openly and publicly and talk about a lot of the things, mental health, alcohol and drug addiction, sexual promiscuity, thinking it was love, you name it, and all of the other things. An inability to even consider how somebody else feels because I had no ability to understand myself, right? All of these things, when I stood in front of a mirror at 50 years old and looked at myself, it was like, wow, the rest, if I live another 50, I couldn't possibly make up for the trail of damage that I did. Right. And so, how does one, but I'm going to try, so I avail myself in my life as a living amends, really, I believe that's the only way that I can come to some sort of healing and balance for myself.
If you enjoyed that episode with our guest expert, Michael Koth, please stay tuned next week for a bonus episode with more discussion and Q&A about my physicology and how it can help you.
Scene 1, Apple, take 1.
Hi, I'm Shane Borza, your content creator coach. I have 2 books on filmmaking, Film Notes, where you learn to write, direct, and produce, and the Film Notes Workbook, where you can learn checklists and paperwork to streamline creating your content. Available at shaneborza.com. I also have filmmaker resources like the Paperwork Bundle with over 300 documents, the Sound Effects Bundle with almost 3,000 files, and the Music Bundle featuring 900 tracks of all genres. Want to build your professional credits? Become an associate producer and get listed on IMDb. Let me help you get your art out into the world.
Scene 1, Apple, take 1.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Solve Network. As a reminder, these calls are held live on the first and third Thursday of each month. If you'd like to join us as either a listener or guest expert, please contact me at shaneborza.com. On behalf of my co-founder, Benjamin Goss, we're glad you are a part of the network and hope you are finding solutions. If you need solutions, please reach out.